Welcome to Clotheshorse, the podcast that really does love to ride a bike past your house. You'll understand why I said that in a few minutes. I'm your host, Amanda, and this is episode 129. We're in the midst of a surprise, even to me, mini-series about circularity and how it relates to fashion and really every object in our lives. Don't get me started on how a circular economy could change the world. Okay, I'll definitely be talking about that in the next episode, don't you worry. Today's guest is Jessica, a designer, a pattern maker, an educator, a consultant, and a dreamer. She has so much experience in a variety of different areas of the fashion industry, but the primary focus of our conversation today will be the textile recycling industry. We'll also be talking about all the ways the industry has changed just in the span of our careers, including sample waste and diminished quality. Diminished quality. 1,000 million bummers right there, right? Anyway, we're going to be talking about all that, and we're going to be talking about so much more. When Jessica and I recorded this conversation, I was in the early days of COVID, and I became much sicker a few days later. So I didn't really remember our conversation super well because a few days of fever made everything a blur. It's still kind of a blur. But re-listening to it as I was editing it just made me so happy. So I can't wait for you to meet her. Okay, get ready for an abrupt transition in topic. Here it is. It's happening right now. When I was 27 years old, I met a person that impressed me so much. I couldn't stop thinking about him. And I know as I say that, you're hearing it and you're nodding your head because you've had a similar experience. And for me, it was all consuming. And you know what? I didn't know this at the time completely, but I had an inkling of it. It was a weird time for me emotionally. I see that in retrospect very clearly, but at the time, I only knew it a little bit. It was just 4 years after my partner had died, a mere 4 years after my entire life had turned upside down and changed in every possible way. So my heart, my ability to feel that kind of romantic love and excitement, it just hadn't even come close to feeling anything other than grief for years. I've been going through the motions of working, of being a parent, and making friends, and pretending to be just fine for years. But the entire time, I expected to look down and see a gaping wound in my chest. I hadn't felt good about very much for a very long time. And my friends, I have to tell you, this was an unusual state for me because I was born with a whole lot of romantic notions and a great general lust for life and people. This was different. This person's name was Brian Eastwood. And I'm going to go ahead and just say that full name to all of you because I doubt he will ever listen to Clotheshorse. Although if he is right now, hi Brian. I'm glad you're still posting a lot of cute animal pictures on Instagram. Anyway, you'll never find him on social media. And if you know him, congratulations, you're a very lucky person. Then you probably also know me from Portland, and you already know how obsessed with him I was. And it's important that I use his full name because that's how he's always been filed away in my brain. Never Brian, always Brian Eastwood. So yeah, I was obsessed. I met him at a bar. He was friends with my best friend Raina's boyfriend. He teased me for carrying fruit in my purse. And as we all biked over to his house, he was tossing tiny fireworks along the way, which was both, appalling and also adorable to me. It's hard to explain all of the reasons I liked him. It's not just because he teased me about carrying fruit in my purse, which, when I say it out loud, is kind of a tease-worthy behavior. But yes, there were so many reasons, so many. And It is hard to explain all the reasons I liked him, mostly because this podcast does surprisingly have a little bit of a time limit, not because I've forgotten them. He had a nice house. We had all of the same records. His cat was named Choco Cat, which is a Sanrio character. He loved tuna melts, me too, and cookbooks. Of course I do. See, you're all thinking, okay, I see why you liked him. I mean, he intentionally misspelled items on his own shopping list in the most ridiculous way for his own amusement. That's adorable, right? The admiration was mutual. But you know what? Things made it complicated. He was a lot older than me. I didn't care. I had a kid, although he never said anything negative about it. It made me feel nervous about getting serious with him, with anyone, really. And you know what? I was still grieving, and my feelings were chaotic, to say the least. His friends tried to sleep with me. We were off and on in a way that honestly makes me sad even now, because he was the first man I had ever met that felt like an intellectual equal to me, that felt sensitive and sweet in the right ways, but also was super funny. We had this weird thing of showing up separately at events in unplanned matching outfits, and people noticed it. But as I mentioned, things were messy for no reason and all the reasons, and yet I couldn't get him out of my head or my heart. We lived about 10 blocks from one another, and I engineered every single bike ride to work, to run errands, to meet friends, to pick up from daycare. Every single bike ride that involved passing through Southeast Portland was mapped by his house. So sometimes I was pedaling past his house 2, 3, 4 times a day. Not because I wanted to see him. I just wanted to see that he still existed. And so he became a part of my life routine. There was so much comfort in all of it. Those bike rides, there was thinking about him whenever I wasn't working or taking care of Dylan or drawing or writing. He was always in my thoughts. Biking by his house was just second nature. It was just part of what it was to live my life. He was just part of my life. When I moved to the other side of the country and could no longer bike by his house every day, you would think that was the end of it, but instead, we doubled down. We started texting more regularly. I hung out with him every time I was in town. I really wanted to make something happen with him, but I was always too cowardly, too afraid of things going sideways, and maybe too afraid of changing my life. Because were I to pursue that, a lot of things would have to change. This went on for years. My friends, a decade. Every time I would see him or hear about him, for all of those years, my stomach just filled with butterflies. The longing, I can feel it. I can remember it. It was this feeling that rose up my throat and back through my head and sort of encircled my brain and just squeezed on it. It was excruciating. Even when I was dating someone else who I super was into, or moving to a new city, or just really busy with the act of living life, as happens to all of us, Brian Eastwood was still the fantasy world my brain visited in boring work meetings, on transatlantic flights, when I was in bed with a cold, or driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. I can assure you that I was still there mentally long after everyone, even Brian himself, had assumed that I'd moved on. Brian Eastwood was woven into the fabric of my everyday existence. He was part of all of the routines and patterns. After so many years of operating this way, the habit was so deeply ingrained that it no longer felt like a habit. It was just how my life was. It never even occurred to me that it might be unhealthy, probably was, a waste of my time, definitely was. a lot of years right there doing the same thing over and over again, even though maybe it took a different form because I couldn't really live in LA and ride my bike past his house in Portland, right? But then something happened. Something major. Something that all of you already know happened. I met Dustin. He was kind. He loved animals. I don't know why I'm using past tense here. These things are all true. He loved me. He loves me. He was and is my intellectual equal. He felt like family almost instantly. And in so many ways, he is my best friend and my partner in almost everything I do. When Dustin proposed to me, that's a funny and sweet story in itself for another time. The first thing I thought was not, oh my God, planning a wedding is stressful or monogamy is scary. It was, well, I guess Brian Eastwood will never be my boyfriend now. And you know what? That was a weird mental shift to accept because no matter what was going on in my life, that was still happening in my mind every day. This pattern, this mental routine had lived with me for years and years, and now it had to end. I had to reroute my brain's thinking habits, if that makes any sense. I mean, it was conscious work, even though I was really excited about everything else that was happening in my life and super in love with Dustin and in love with my life. It was still hard. It was a big change. It was a scary change. It was accepting a big change. It's not easy to change your habits, whether it's your decade-long crush on someone who shares all of your favorite books or the relationship you have with stuff in your life. Changing your go-to behaviors and thought patterns is both terrifying and pretty excruciating. And furthermore, knowing that you must change, it's scary. I couldn't keep thinking about Brian Eastwood if I wanted to have a good marriage. There was no way I could set myself up for success without changing my behaviors. And this is sad to say, but ultimately for years, I had been letting myself live